Hey, this is Adam Gregory, and you're listening to Tobin Tonight.
Let's start way back to, I guess, your upbringing here in Canada. You were born and raised in Edmonton, Alberta. So I feel, and I'm probably going to get a little bit of hate from the fan base out west, but I feel like your course was set for country music when you're born out west.
Well, you know what? I can remember clearly as a kid, like my parents would have a George Strait or Randy Travis or Vince Gill cassette playing in the car, and my dad would be able to sing to every word, and I just remember being amazed in the back seat listening to him sing to every word. I'm like, man, I want to do that one day. So I kind of got my love, I think, from my dad. Said he used to sing when he was a kid, and then I would grow up listening to Vince Gill and just really honing in on that gift that he had and wanting to be that. So I just worked hard. I had my record deal when I was 13 years old, which came from a 5-song demo CD I made, and the rest was history. I traveled most of the country and most of the world, and music has done well.
So this is what I'm interested to find out, because when you have young stars that start at, like, say, most times I'm thinking 17 or 18, like, when you're thinking of for someone like myself, pop music comes naturally. So like when you got like Selena Gomez, Bieber, One Direction that start just say 17 to 18 on these shows or brought up by Disney, it just speaks a lot more volume when 13 at a time when these shows aren't around, and again 13 you sign a deal to have songs basically done, have a record deal made. How did you get discovered? Like, who came to you at 13 and said, you got it, we got to have them?
I was working with a management team at that time, and they had introduced me to certain people, and I wound up working with this guy that recorded the 5-song demo with me, and we kind of, what we had in mind is we were going to send it to like talk shows like Oprah, and at that time Ricky Lake. That kind of dates me a little bit, and just to see what kind of feedback we would get and if they would be interested in maybe interviewing me. That was always a hope. And then we sent it to record labels, aim for that. And Sony, Mike Roth from Sony, the vice president, got a hold of us and said, out of all the thousands of CDs they get like per week or whatever, mine was on the top of the shelf in the drawer. He put it in and listened to it. He's like, man, this kid's really got something we like. And he liked the tone of my voice. And actually the one song that really caught their ear was a cover I did of Rebecca Lynn by Brian White. Remember that song, Rebecca Lynn?
I can't remember it, but I mean, if someone sent me an email or a link to it, it probably refreshed my memory.
Yeah, so it was that song. I guess they heard a tone in my voice, and so they flew my mom and dad, myself down to Toronto, met with them, and they actually presented me with a song called The Ring, which made it onto my first album. But this is how it happened. They presented it to me, and Mike said, okay, I want you to go home back to the hotel tonight, learn this song, come back here tomorrow, and we're going to plop you in the studio, and you're going to lay it down. It was a test, to see how quickly of a learner I was. And so I went to the hotel. I learned the song front to back, memorized it, went in the studio, nailed it. And I'm sure if they could have offered me a deal right on the spot, they would have. But, obviously you got to go through all the legal stuff and all that, make it all good. So we did that, and so I was with them for about 6 years, the label, and made 2 albums with them and had countless, top 10 singles or whatever with them. So had a good run.
You hear about acts today, like the ones that come to mind that we've had on, like Ali, Sarah Wicked, even your Tennille Towns, your Hunter Brothers. Like, it seems like you don't really notice how much hard work goes in, behind the scenes. You just see them one day with a song on the radio, and you're like, wow, they got some lucky break, their first song ever, and they're already on the radio. And then, say it to their face, and you're almost getting ready to get punched out, because they'd be looking at you like, no, like, I've spent like 7 or 8 years just trying to get here, like just trying to get something.
Yeah, like prior to that record deal, I was like, 10, 11, 12. I was hitting the circuit. I was going every weekend. I'd go to school during the week. Every weekend I'd be gigging. We would have this friend of mine, Sailor Rains, had a band called the Haystack Boogie Band, and they would play at a local club / bar, Wild West Saloon or whatever, in the west end of Edmonton. So I was too young to get in the bars, obviously. So my parents kind of applied for this Alberta Liquor Board license, which would allow me to, sit in the car until my time to go on stage, and then they would come and get me, and I would hop on stage and do my little set, and then back out to the car. So I did that for the longest time, and then that kind of sparked the idea of making a demo CD that I could sell side stage at these little gigs that I did. And then that led to one thing. It's like, why don't we send this around to different labels and this and that? And that's how it all came to be.
No, it's interesting because, like, I remember when I was younger and I was turning on, like, your CMT Countdown or just turning on, like, CMT in general. And I think I really got glued to, you'd see, like, your Aaron Lines, you'd see your Paul Brents, and you're a kid, so you're just thinking, great, country music, like your parents like it, and you tune in and like it too, but you don't even really think about it till you get older that, okay, some of these acts that are on are Canadian, and they're right up there with, like, your Garth Brooks, your Tim McGraw, because the beauty of it is it's a countdown. So number 20 could be Terry Clark, number 19 could be Adam Gregory, 18 Garth Brooks, and you don't see it as Canada, US, you just see it as country music. Which I thought was awesome, because years later when you find out someone like yourself is Canadian, I was like, well, geez, like, I grew up listening to No Vacancies, Horseshoes, all these songs, and I was like, geez, this kid's like 16, maybe 18, maybe even 20, and I mean, as a young kid, you're looking up and going like, wow, like, he's old. And then when you get to 20 and you're just there like, no, geez, he's young and he was doing it. But when you tell me you're signed at 13, I'm like, you got to feel at 20, you're like, I'm a veteran. I know this stuff.
Yeah, you know what? Technically, I guess I could be considered a veteran in the industry, but I still feel young. I still feel like I have a lot of the goods to offer. And it's a different market and industry than when I first started out, definitely. Can't deny that. It's changed dramatically. I'm still kicking along with the other artists out there. Well, right now it's tough.
I don't mean that in like a negative way. It's just like when I'm looking at it and I'm saying like,
oh no, God.
When I'm looking at it and I'm saying, okay, he's still going, and it's just weird because when you're looking at the old videos of No Vacancy, Horseshoes, like, I still listen to those songs. They're timeless, which is, kudos to you for making those songs great. But when I think it was like Only Know I Do, and they came up with like a pop version and a country version for that, I was like, who's this new guy on the scene? Like, he's got longer hair, he's got a beard, and then I'm like, wait, that's the same guy? I'm like, geez, I remember like Frosted Tips and a young face, and now, like, of course everyone changes, but I was like, the voice sounded a little bit more deeper, but I know that's one thing that you mentioned prior, and I guess that's what stood out when you're 13, is because you always had this kind of raspy voice.
Yeah, the industry has really seen me grow up through the years, just different levels of maturity through each album. And I remember when I was a kid, you're talking about the raspy voice and all that. My mom actually took me to the doctor because she was a little concerned. I had a real raspy voice as a kid, and I would talk and it'd sound like really horsey kind of, and she had it checked, and there was nothing wrong with my vocal cords. They were actually like perfect shaped and color and everything, but they were a little bit bigger than the actual normal vocal cord for a kid my age. So they kind of counted it off as that, and just said, just keep doing what you're doing, singing and all that. You're not hurting yourself. So I did, and as I got older, I kind of grew into that kind of rasp. And I found a way to control it and, add it into inflections in songs where I felt it was needed. And it's like kind of like a Neil Diamond. Neil Diamond has a rasp, right?
No, absolutely. I just think it's interesting because, like, I know for someone like myself, no, I'm not a singer in any shape of the form, but I can do different voice ranges. Now, if you put me in a room with Adam Levine of Maroon 5, like, he hits high notes like it's no tomorrow. Then there's other acts that can hit low notes, and you're like, I guess what comes to mind is like a Sky McGraw, that you listen to his voice, and you think it's just nothing but low, low. And I'm like, okay, try mixing two of those together. Maybe it works, maybe it don't. Then there's some that can do both. But I was just interested because you seem to do really well with your vocal range. I know we mentioned this the last time we talked. I think it was like you had the song Dirt Road Therapy was coming out. And I listened to that and I was like, geez, like the guy still has it. Like it's a great voice. And you can listen to No Vacancy right up until Dirt Road Therapy and anything in between. And yeah, you might know a little bit of difference in the voice, but it still sounds like Adam Gregory, which I think is a really good compliment to have.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, you know, there was a point in my career where I couldn't do falsetto at all. I would go for it and be like, like I had no falsetto range. And just all one day, it's like just opened up and everything just worked.
Like I know with Shania and a few other ones, like depending on the notes they sing, you'll see them take, months or almost like a year or so off just to get the voice back. And not being the musical aspect or into it, I used to always laugh at it and go like, yeah, all right, take a year off. Like, geez, like don't talk to anyone, don't even practice because you're basically saying your voice is gone. But then when you actually see a little bit of the hard work that goes into it, keeping the voice in that realm, you're like, oh man, like they really put a lot of pressure on that voice because in my mind, this is how kind of dumb or, silly I am of thinking is, okay, you're doing a couple of concerts a night. Okay, cool. But I don't realize that, yeah, you're doing a couple of concerts, just say a night or in a week, but it's almost like 4 or 5 months of constantly singing every night for 3 or 4 hours. It's not like breaks in between. So yeah, it's going to strain your voice.
I tell you, brother, it's a real thing that artists are faced with a lot of times. Brian White and Shania Twain, for instance, and my good buddy Thomas Wade, they all went through. Thomas had a different situation. He literally lost his speaking voice and his vocal ability for a good long while, and he had to refrain himself just talk and sing and everything. It's a real scary thing when you have so much invested in your singing and it's like your livelihood, and then something one day just changes and it kind of all goes away. That happens to a lot of artists. It's a very scary thing. Like this could be gone tomorrow. You got to take care of it while you have it and know that it's a gift that you just continually have to hone in on.
We actually had an act on just before Christmas, and they were postponing their CD for a while because their lead singer had to get surgery done on his voice, and I just kind of like making the joke to him of saying like, okay, like what happened? And then when he explained it to me, I was like, really? Like just from singing? And then I thought about it more and I'm like, okay, well if you're constantly doing it, it's not like you're singing one song and they're like, okay, thanks for coming out to my concert, see you in another year. You're like, you're doing like maybe, I'd say 10, 12 songs. You could be doing a concert at 5 o'clock, then another one at 8, and then maybe a midnight one depending on what the audience is, and that's one night. And then you're doing one, just say another few nights down the road. So, and you're going city to city, town to town, then you're doing press conferences and all this, and that all affects your voice. It's not just singing, it's just your voice in general.
Just 20 minutes of yelling can actually start the process of vocal nodules.
I can imagine, like, so I play a lot of video games, and when I lose, I yell, scream, and, then the next day someone will be like, you were playing video games, weren't you? And I'm like, no, why? Yeah. Why'd you ask me that? And then they're like, because you got no voice.
You got the vocal cords, like they're like when you're hitting them high notes and whatever, if you're not doing it correctly, they're like smacking together, like really friction and stuff. And then you start getting these calluses built on them, and then all of a sudden your voice is like cutting in and out. And I've known so many artists that unfortunately has happened to, and it's a scary thing. They got to like Olympic. It's like going to the Olympics. You have to retrain yourself to sing again.
I want to also kind of get into this topic with you now. Of course, everything's kind of in limbo with COVID. How are you keeping up with, I say, like just country music and the writing process? Like, are you writing new songs? Are you, putting out some live streams every now and again? Like, what's keeping you going during COVID?
I did do some live streams, yes. I try to separate the work balance thing. So I try to write when I have free downtime from my kiddo, and yeah, so I'm keeping up. I'm putting out singles still. My latest single out is called Perfect World, and I released it during this time, and it actually went hand in hand with what's going on in the world. I just wish it was a perfect world. Wish everybody would get along and this and that. And, with all the riots and stuff we had going on, especially here, it just seemed to be, pretty fitting for what was going on in the world.
And so, like, when you were coming up with the idea for, I guess, the perfect world, like, was all this already, like, in mind, or?
Not at all. My band member and I wrote it the back lounge of our tour bus a number of years back. It kind of just came to surface again when we were making this last album. I'm like, man, that's a great song. I want to put that on here, and I want to actually title the album it, go that far. We released it as a single, and it just happened to fit, with what's going on in the world.
That's really interesting, because it's like, some artists I know have come out with songs like occurring when this COVID has happened or the Black Lives Matter movement has happened. Like, they've released songs, I guess, inspired by that or to inspire others. But, that's kind of a perfect combination where it's like the song was already created and it's just like the timing of it couldn't be better put.
And music is around to spread love and joy, man, in hardships especially. I'm a lover of people. I'm not a hater of people. So I put out music to hopefully bring people together. And this song and the songs I've released prior, I think have connected in that way. I hope so.
Well, let's put it this way. I mean, for someone like myself, and there could be others out there, like, I still have Dirt Road Therapy on my iPhone. I've still got the old ones on. So, and like, I'll find myself on a random given day listening to them, and I'm like, okay, I'm proud, number one, that he's Canadian, and number two, he still sounds like he's still got it there. But like, even some songs you'll hear them and you think, okay, they're dated. But like, if I played, say, No Vacancies or even Dirt Road Therapy back to back to my niece or nephew, they'll look at it and be like, oh, that's really cool. Was that released yesterday, or was that really? And I'd be like, I'd kind of laugh at them because I'd be like, no, this song was released like way back, and this one was released a few years ago, and they'll be like, oh, well, they're both really good. And I'm like, there you go.
Yeah, I think we hit it right on the head back then as far as keeping it timeless, because a lot of the giddy up, get ready, let's get it on, and don't send the invitation, it has kind of the feel that fits now even. I think it's timeless stuff, like you said. I like that word a lot.
And it's interesting because I kind of want to bring this up as well when you mentioned that, is like, because there is a difference in listening to like the old stuff compared to what's coming out today. Now, it's not like a knock on anyone, because listen, I love Garth Brooks as much as I like Sam Hunt. Some of it has an old country sound, some of it has a little bit more of a country pop sound. For someone like yourself that's been around now during almost like the two different eras, do you ever find yourself conflicted to figure out like what you have to release?
Yeah, it gets a little tricky. For me especially, I don't want to sound like everybody else. Yeah, I want to have my own unique sound and not fall into that realm of it. But at the same time, I want to stay true to who I am. And I did. I listened to that 90s music a lot, and the Garths and everything. And I love that sound. And how to incorporate it into now music with the pop inflections, like you're saying, it can be tricky.
Yeah, like, because the act that really comes to mind there when I think of someone that's been around from the 90s right up till now, and again, somewhat maintains in the lane, but there are definitely songs that are a little bit like, okay, I can see that you're trying to get a new generation here, and sometimes it's good, sometimes, everyone has their own opinion, but the first one that comes to my mind is like Tim McGraw.
Definitely. Tim has been able to evolve, fairly well, and, put out like songs like Humble and Kind and all that. Yeah, it's a ballad, but his music is deep and it touches. Or like Brad Paisley even, he's from the 90s and he does that, like, when I get where I'm going and I see my name, all that stuff. And, it is that's timeless music to me as well. And I love singing along to it.
Yeah, no, I thought it was just interesting because, like I said, as someone like yourself that's, like, been there since the, early 2000s, and you're seeing this change, and it's like trying to maintain being true to yourself, not getting caught up and being different. It's just interesting, like I said, just the aspect of kind of what goes through your mind, because, like, you'll see someone like a Sam Hunt that started off with writing music, then he sings it, and now you see that wave, and then you got like another act of like I believe Hardy, and then like when you listen to his, it's like okay, it's still kind of like a country sound because of his voice, but you'll see a fan that will be like, oh, I love Hardy, I love this song, and you'll play him something way classic, and they'll be like, oh, I don't like that, and you're like, it's still country, it's just a different country, and then they'll like kind of snot like put up their nose to you and be like, well, I like this better, and you're like, okay, like that's fine, but this is all country. I'm a little bit concerned. Like if you don't appreciate this person, I'm almost concerned for the future.
There's definitely it hints more at a pop inflection in the newer country now for sure.
And there's one fellow that actually I know you teamed with when you were younger, and he's another one that kind of brings to mind that I call him a little bit of a triple threat because he was around in the early stages of what country pop, or it might have been considered rock and roll at the time too. And then of course he went off to do a TV show, and now he did, I guess, kind of like a rap R&B team up with Lil Nas, but Billy Ray Cyrus.
Billy's always reinventing himself. I find I've run into him, several times and say like the airport on a radio tour or whatever. He's like, "Hey man, how are you?" He's like, "I have this idea." He gets talking with me. He's like, "Man, I have this idea I'm working on." And at the time, it was that TV show, "I'm Still the King" or something. What is it called?
Oh, okay. I
Yeah,
can't remember the
he was
name
doing
of
a
it.
TV
Yeah.
show, and this was prior to that TV show coming out. He's like, "Man, I had this idea. It's going to be put into action, and maybe if it gets up and rolling, we'll have you on the show or something." So he's always inventing himself, and the Hannah Montana thing, and now this duet he did. Yeah, he's great.
It's just funny to me because it's like, it's funny when you think of the different generations and ages. Like for someone like myself, like, I've heard Achy Breaky Heart a million times, but it never really dawned on me who he was until like maybe years later. And then I was like, okay, the name kind of stuck out, but you didn't really reference it to anything. And then I grew up watching Hannah Montana, and I used to just think it was a dad, like someone just cast their dad. And then when you did the role, you're like, okay, geez, he's Miley Cyrus's dad. Cool. And then you're like, wait, why he's singing "Achy Breaky Heart"? You're like, oh, I remember that guy who sang that song. And then someone's like, that's the same guy. And I'm like, no, it's not. It is. And then you're like, oh, it is. So it's different generations have a different gap. Like I know it now for him being "Achy Breaky Heart" and Miley's dad and on Hannah Montana. You have a generation now that might only remember him as, doing something with Lil Nas. And then you have a generation before me that will say, like, what are you talking about? You don't remember him from this, this, and this? And I'll be like, no. So it's weird to see someone like stick around for that long and have different meaning to different people.
Yeah, and I sat down and talked to him, like I said, a number of times. And one time we were talking about "Achy Breaky Heart" and the success like that it had. It became one of those songs where it's like a lot of people, it's like either they liked it or they didn't like it. Even with that said, he's like, you know what? That song paid so well. I'm still living off of that song, and if they don't like it, that's fine. It provided a life for my family and I. It's music is powerful, man.
Well, yeah, and that's what I mean. Like the whole concept of it too is like when you're writing music, and I give you props for this because, like you said, you want to keep your own identity, try to keep up with where everything's evolving. But I give you props because if you're stuck around for this long, you're making memorable music. Like even with Dirt Road Therapy, I can tell you the first time I've heard that when we did the interview a couple of years ago, and I put it on my iPhone. I was on the way to soccer. And it was like a miserable day out in Ottawa. And I heard the song and I was like, all right, this is going to be on repeat for the whole hour bus ride that I have to travel from soccer because it was that good.
Oh, that's great, man.
But I just remember, like, when you have these music, like even the music videos or the songs that are that well done and they can stick with you, I think that gives you a bit of credibility in the sense of, even if it's just one fan. But if they come up to you years later at a concert and say, like, oh yeah, I loved your concert, love the new stuff. It's like, but yeah, like I remember back then, this is the exact moment I heard this song, blah, blah, blah. You got to take that and be blown away with that they remember all this from way back then as well.
And definitely, totally. And like when you go to a concert from an artist that you grew up listening to and all that, you want to hear those songs too. You know, you don't want to hit them. You don't want to hit the audience with all brand new songs and leave out all the familiar with. But Horseshoes and No Vacancy, Big Star, all them songs are still crowd. People relate to them big time.
With the song Perfect World, like, what is your, I guess, end goal with this song? Like, what do you want it to achieve?
Well, you know what? We all, I think, in the back of our minds wish for somewhat of a perfect world, but we all know that it's not a perfect world or even possible, really. That's kind of the message in this song. You know, in a perfect world, there'd be no bitterness, no hate, no jealousy. In a perfect world, we wouldn't need to fear for all that we hold dear. We'd have no doubts of what tomorrow would bring. You know, that's some of the lyrics. The world that we're living in today, it's like, we don't know what tomorrow is going to bring with this pandemic or how many more lives are going to be struck, you know, by it. And so it's like the song was so fitting. And when we wrote it, we didn't realize that this was all going to happen. You know, it works in mysterious ways, that's for sure.
Now, can you give us any kind of updates about the album as well?
Well, it's on iTunes and all the digital ports that you can buy music. It has 8 songs. I've released 6 songs off of this 8-song album just because I love the songs so much. I believe in them, that they're single worthy. And so, yeah, life is good. And go check it out. Get yourself a copy.
That's going to do it for this episode of Tobin Tonight. Our thanks to Adam Gregory for coming on the show. Remember, you can find past, present, and future episodes on TobinTonight.com, Spotify, and iTunes. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and leave a comment or two. For Tobin and myself, this is Jacob saying, thanks for listening, and good night.